Most people date the start of the Cold War with 1947, after the Grand Alliance of the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union had collapsed. However, I'll argue today that the foundations for the Cold War were built right at the end of the First World War. In fact, it was after the devastation of total war, of World War I, that the people were looking for a new world order. Clearly, the world, as we know it, before the war had failed, and many of those pre-war ideals had been destroyed. Now, the question was, how should we go forward to restructure governments and societies? At this point, there were two alternatives. One was being offered by President Woodrow Wilson of the United States, and the other by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, who had just overthrown the Romanov dynasty in Russia. It is these two competing visions of a post-World War I world that will form the basis for the post-World War II Cold War. World War I exacerbated the problems of the Tsarist government led by Nicholas II, and by 1917, the Russian people revolted. The first Russian Revolution was in February of the Russian calendar and resulted in the provincial government that was led by Alexander Kerensky. This was a coalition of the various revolutionary forces, few of whom were in agreement with the type of new government that should be established. Kerensky tried his best to hold these groups together, but he made some tactical mistakes. He did not withdraw Russia from the war and did not hold elections for a new government. This left open the possibility for a new revolution, or more specifically, a political coup that was led by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik faction in October of 1917. Once the Bolsheviks seized power, Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and withdrew Russia from the war and addressed the real concerns of the people around land distribution and supply of food. What the Bolsheviks were offering to the Russian people and beyond was the political alternative to the old European forms of government. Communism would empower the working class and return to them the fruits of their labor. The richest 1% had been protected by European governments at the expense of the working class. Lenin called for a world revolution to bring down these European governments and return wealth to the common people. Clearly, this scared European governments who had just defeated Germany and now had to deal with the Bolsheviks. To foment world revolution and to spread communism, Lenin created Comintern, which was meant to unite the various revolutionary groups throughout the world. Lenin was hoping that communists in England, Germany, Spain, and France would join with Russia to form one country dedicated to the workers and peasants and to the overthrow of the elite. By 1919, President Wilson recognized that this was a battle for the hearts and minds of Europeans. He even offered a food and trade initiative to undermine Bolshevik efforts in Europe. So as you can see, the foundation for the Cold War was already there in 1919. But what was President Wilson offering in place of communism and the World Revolution? Wilson was suggesting that the U.S. would export American exceptionalism to the rest of the world. The phrase that most associate with Wilson's plan is, "The world must be made safe for democracy." His approach is sometimes called moral diplomacy because there was an almost evangelical aspect to it. At its core, Wilson argued that the U.S. must support nations with similar beliefs and values, that is, Christian values, and keep in mind that the Bolsheviks were atheists. The U.S. must limit nations with different ideologies. And finally, the U.S. must increase the number of democratic nations and injure economically non-democratic nations. Clearly, Wilson's democracy and free market capitalism was on a collision course with Lenin's communism. So you can see how Wilson's idea of a democratic and capitalistic model of government and society directly clashed with the Bolshevik ideal of a communist state for the workers and peasants, one largely without a government protecting the interests of the wealthy. Thanks for watching this video. If you like this video, subscribe for more educational content.